Welcome to another episode of Behavioral Echoes, the podcast where we explore the fascinating intersections of personal behavior, psychology, and success. I'm Christopher Eady, your master coach, psychologist, and business strategist.
And I'm Lisa Oborn, your positive psychology enthusiast, certified coach, and change practitioner. Today, we're diving into the topic of the power of positive reinforcement. This is one of my personal favorite topics, as it is amazing how the brain works. What you believe and how you can influence it. That voice inside your head is truly amazing. It impacts what happens to you mentally, physically, and spiritually.
That's a great overview. Let's dive a little deeper into the psychology behind positive reinforcement. The messages we repeat to ourselves, we begin to believe, and it doesn't matter whether they're negative or positive. They may have started from an external source, but we keep that message alive in our subconscious by continuously repeating it. Consider individuals who seem to effortlessly excel in their careers or quickly bounce back from setbacks. It's not about talent all the time or luck. Most often, it's about their mindset. They continuously reinforce beliefs like, I'm capable of success, or I can overcome challenges, and their brains align with those expectations. They create pathways that support those outcomes, neural pathways. On the other hand, if we constantly tell ourselves that we're not good enough or that success is out of reach, Lisa, our brains are going to believe that. They're going to act on those negative messages. We have beliefs, and those beliefs determine how we feel, and how we feel is going to determine how we act. This is where the power of positive reinforcement comes into play. Repeating empowering beliefs literally reshape the neural pathways in our brain. It makes it easier to achieve any goal or overcome any obstacle.
I agree completely, Chris. We see this with so many people that appear to do what we think is impossible. Why? They don't believe in the word impossible. It's not in their vocabulary. We see it in people that have poor health that constantly repeat the negative impact of the diagnosis. And what happens to them? They become that diagnosis. It's not that their condition is any worse, but they've believed every single negative factor in it, and it just impacts them. They've become their label, and it's become their story. Other people just consider it's a label and nothing else. And the overall outcome and impact within those neural pathways is completely different.
That's really interesting the way that you describe that. Absolutely true. And the way that this shows up in teams is that, when a team constantly says, hey, we're not meeting our goals. Hey, this isn't right. Hey, we've got to do better at this. Hey, this isn't the way we should operate a team. When a team constantly hears that, they eventually become a poor performing team. And at some point in time, they're not going to deliver on time. They have to have a focal belief that their work reinforces. Now, this can start with sharing successes and ideas, because when you do this, people come together. I'm sure that most of us listening to this, we've all experienced teams or team members that are negative about something when it comes to getting work done, especially if they weren't a part of it. So they downplay the success that's happening in the moment. The team dynamic suffers because of that. And we see people just working as independent and not a team. From an individual perspective, team members begin to lose confidence, and that's when the work begins to have a negative outcome. So you can understand why motivation and pride, it may be lacking, but it's a vicious cycle. You'll see innovative ideas just stop flowing. And those people who were actively engaged, they become silent. This directly oftentimes leads to burnout and certainly mental health issues. And then we see other teams where people share and learn from each other, and their outcomes are different. Their outcomes are great. But this is what leads to success with businesses and customers.
And I can relate to this completely, Chris, is you see that scenario, and I've been in that scenario when people start to have that behavior, like you mentioned in teams. I'm the first one to admit I do that. I will shut down. I no longer bring ideas because I don't see the value. And we see the complete opposite in those that work together, that have a great culture and mindset, that want to lift each other up. And it doesn't matter where the idea came from. There's not that same kind of a competition. There's that team spirit of, yay, team, we've done something great and we're happy. And it brings that healthy mental health and that physical perspective, and you see the outcome. You have less sick days within the team. You have that pitching in. Everybody wants to help, even if it's not something that they're an expert with, they want to contribute. And this all comes back to that positive reinforcement. When you work together, you share the success. You want to get up in the morning and go to work and be with each other, as opposed to the other side, when you create that negative culture, when you create that competition, where you create that mindset, you can't wait to leave and go home or get out of that meeting. You don't want to be a part of it. Sick days start to increase. People start to, you know, compete negatively against each other. You see the egos. You see people always wanting to take vacation. And there's always a reason to be absent and not show up.
Hmm. That's a really, 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 really good point. Let's talk about some practical things that our listeners can do to improve this. I mean, from a good coaching perspective, that can be positive psychology, what people learn as a coach. It could be neurolinguistic programming. What examples can we talk through that really helps people understand that the first law of psychology is you get more of what you reinforce?
And a great exercise that I do is about 30 minutes before a meeting is going to take place. I'll take 5 minutes to just breathe and assess what I'm thinking, because in my head somewhere, I'm perceiving how this meeting is going to go or this activity. I look at what actions and conversations are happening in my subconscious because I know I'm setting the tone for how I'm going to behave in that meeting. And we all hear messages in our head as to what we expect the outcome to be, what we expect to happen. But if you look at it, those are conversations and those are things going through your subconscious that happened a long time ago. It's not current. It's things that we remember that we didn't like in many cases, depending on how you feed your head, or it's things that we like. And it's important to listen to those to see, are you setting the stage for a great, engaging conversation, or are you setting the stage to shut each other down? In a lot of cases, what you hear is your ego speaking. Are you having messages where you don't want to give others credit, where you want to, and you know you're going to have debates, not positive debates, just debates to debate? You don't want to share what's going to add value. But think about the others that you're engaging with. In a lot of cases, they're heroes. They're people that you really want to work with, that you want to share ideas, that you want to brainstorm with, and don't have to compete against, don't have to, I have to be better than you. What goes through your subconscious is exactly how you're going to behave. And to me, that exercise is great because I know in advance how I potentially can behave in that meeting and gives me the ability and the time to shift and change the outcome before I even go in.
That's a really great approach. I like that because it's intentional and it's setting yourself up where you can stay mindful, be in the moment and handle what's coming because you know where you're starting from as opposed to not knowing and then something happens and then you could be all over the map or be reacting. It's a really good approach. Another great tip might be just moving. Before you can actually feel any emotion, you have to have some sense of motion. Now, Lisa or myself can explain this to you in a one-on-one, but the way that it works is if you're feeling a particular something, and it doesn't matter what, it could be anxiety, it could be angst, it could be overexcitement, overwhelm, oftentimes just simply shifting your body position. If you've listened to other podcasts, the idea when salespeople smile before they get on a call, there is incredible validity to that because what you do with your body impacts everything.
And those are great tips, and I love it. And we need to stop agreeing with everything that voice in our subconscious says. And doing that allows us to impact the outcome. Most of the time, that voice in your head is giving you crappy advice, and you would never listen to it coming from somebody external. And we all live in a society of information overload. We all talk about it. It's something that we see in the media. And guess what? It's the exact same thing of what's happening in our subconscious. There's also information overload, and we have to question what's relevant and what we really want to listen to, and not just the first thing that pops in there. We have to listen to what matters and who we want to be and become.
Well said. I think we need to be willing to look in the mirror. And when I say look in the mirror, it's not just literally looking in the mirror, but metaphorically just understanding who we are and understanding those deep, dark things that nobody knows and really just being honest with ourselves because that's where we get to change our thought patterns. That's where we get to move. That's where we get to grow. When we begin to listen to positive messages, and how to make things better in our head, those become our focal points. The second law of psychology is you get more of what you focus on. And so these positive messages, when we install them in our subconscious thinking by rooting out and changing the way we think about certain things, we end up in a place where when those messages are there, we tend to look at people differently. We tend to look at situations differently. We tend to look at things that may not have been possible as possibilities because whether it's the law of attraction or just being resourceful, when you have positive things, if it's true that whatever you focus on, you get more of. When you're thinking positive things, your brain begins to look for positive things. And so the law of attraction, as it were, begins to happen because your brain starts to notice positive things. And the same would be true as Lisa said, when you're attracting negative things, just go inside and ask yourself, what am I really thinking inside? There's a good chance that you've probably got something negative going on because that's what your brain is seeing and thinking and attracting.
And I agree completely. And that is fantastic advice, Chris. And, we go back to that old saying, life is what you make it. And if we see the world and we react to the world as everything is negative, that's how your thought process becomes. And those are the voices you listen to. Yes, there's a balance needed because we also know in the same breath, not everything is perfect, but not everything is a disaster. We have to filter out and listen to the right messages. A lot of times when you start looking in the mirror, you'll find out those messages that you're getting is from a version of yourself that could be from childhood, really adds no relevance today. It could be from an experience you had with somebody that was awful and it was a one time thing. And it's really, what do you want to reinforce? What version of yourself do you want to be? How do you want to see the world? And really take that on. And it's a great way to change how we live our life.
It's really interesting, Lisa, because when we think about the practical world, and a lot of times we separate ourselves, in thinking that nature is something over there and we're over here, and the fact that, that's not. We are a biological creature, which means we're part of nature. And what's really interesting is when we think about medical breakthroughs and health breakthroughs and things that seemed impossible and things we couldn't do with our biology, like the 4 minute mile, and these things came about because someone changed their mindset. Roger Banneker wrote it down on a napkin that he was going to run a 4 minute mile. It had never been done. It was just simply the change in the mindset. So when we hear people overcoming issues, when we hear people bouncing back, when people say, gosh, it only took me 3 weeks to heal, and someone else maybe 6 months or 6 weeks. A lot of it has to do with our mindset. If you want positive interactions and a positive life, you have to be willing to change your behavior. And the simple behavior we're talking about is sitting in front of yourself's mirror and thinking about what's going through your mindset. What mindset do you have? What makes up your mindset? What are you reinforcing? What are you thinking about? Because the only person you're impacting in a negative way when you don't do that is yourself.
100%. And I really love these great insights and suggestions as to how we can improve. And it really boils down to, like you said, Chris, positive reinforcement starts with you and it impacts all aspects of our life, from mental to physical to spiritual health. It impacts the personal side, the professional side. Nothing is excluded. And it's just important to see, how do you want to be seen in the world? How do you want people to address you? It really becomes that whole.
How do you want to show up?
Exactly.
To our listeners, we really hope that this episode has really given you some valuable insight and some practical tools Because the power of reinforcement is something that you're going to do every single moment you are alive and thinking. How you do it, how well you do it, what you root out, and what you keep in there is going to determine who you show up as and how you show up.
100%, Chris. And I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in to Behavioral Echoes, and we'll see you in our next episode.